Barakim Habayim. Welcome, everyone, to Zion's Tuesday night Bible study. We are in our next to the last Torah parsha for this book of Leviticus. And why is it called Leviticus? Does anybody know?
Written by the Levites.
No, it was not written by the Levites.
Written for the Levites.
About the Levites and the laws regarding Levitical form of religious government.
Prayer.
So the book of Leviticus is actually called Vayikra. Vayikra. Literally means that he called. And who's doing the calling is unto Moses. And who's actually calling Moses? It's Yahweh. So Vayikra is the name, and it's because it's the first word of this of the Torah, of this segment of the Torah. You see, in Judaism, we take the first or second or third or somewhere in the first two verses, we'll find a special word that's unique that we can give the name for the book, and we take it from the Hebrew word. But it's called Leviticus, and that's I guess you could say a Greek adaptation of the name of the book. And it's because it's really the subject nature and about whom and directed towards the Levites, the Cohens, which are part of the tribe of Levi, and they are the ones who are the priests for Israel. So Leviticus it's really not a bad choice of names for the book because of the nature of who it's written to and what about. This week, we're starting off in chapter 25 in your English Bible. Leviticus chapter 25, and we're beginning with verse 1. It says, Vaydaber Yahweh el Moshe Behar Sinai lemor. And he says, and he spoke, and Yahweh's speaking. And I'll just show you here. In Hebrew, we've got a little bitty yud when it's at the beginning of a word. In particular, it means it's the pronoun he typically. If it was a tav, it would be more than likely the pronoun you or the pronoun she, depending on the context. You have to find out if it's about a female or if it's speaking to you personally, as God's giving instructions. You say, Moses, unto the people of Israel. So that would be tadaber. And you will say, and if it's at the beginning of the word, and if you'll look up on your screen, you'll see here. In fact, let me find a way to get this bigger for this. There it is.
Rabbi?
Yes?
Is it okay we pray?
Huh?
Sorry, we pray?
Yeah, we'll pray. Okay. That'll get you a little bigger visual on it.
Yeah.
Let's pray and ask God to be with us. It says when you stand praying, so I guess I am going to have to stand and pray.
On the way. And
Jews always stand praying.
give me 1 second before you transition.
And we've got a short-handed programmer tonight.
Yeah, put that
There
on
we
the camera
go.
for me.
Which one?
This one.
All right, let's pray. Father God, Avinu Sheva Shamayim, our Father who is in the heavens, we want to show our study and our appreciation of you and your word. We want to be of utmost honor and regard for your word. We ask you to help us to be able to do that. We ask you for your anointing on the teaching tonight, not only for the one who's speaking, but for those who are hearing. We ask you, Lord, that you would just grant your grace, your blessing, your Ruach HaKodesh, to come and work with us as we study your word and learn about your kingdom and your government. So we honor you this day with all that is within us, and we ask you to teach us your word as we come before you. We do revere your word completely, Father. So we ask you, Lord, to just give us all that we need to have in order to truly understand your word and take us deeper than we've ever gone before. In the name of Yeshua the Messiah. Everybody says, Lord, I'm hungry.
Lord, I'm hungry.
I ask you to feed me.
I ask you to feed me.
And I'm thirsty, Lord.
Thirsty, Lord.
I ask you for living water that comes from heaven.
I ask you for living water that comes from heaven.
So I'll have plenty to give to others during the week.
So I plan to get to others during the week.
In the name of Messiah Yeshua.
So
Amen. Baruch Hashem. Now let's go ahead and get into the Torah Parsha. And I wanted to cover a few little basics here. It never hurts to review the basics. How many of you know that? Never hurts to review the basics. Somebody says, well, I don't like milk anymore. I want meat. How many of you can relate to that? Huh? Yeah, I don't. Well, I'll tell you, there's nothing better than a nice, fresh, whole, beautiful glass, ice-cold glass of milk when you're trying to eat a chocolate cake. Or a brownie, as the case might be. So I like milk still, and milk is a necessary ingredient in a lot of products that we cook, isn't it, Mr. Spears?
Yes, it is.
So we're looking at Leviticus chapter 25, beginning in verse 1, and the name of this parsha is Behar, means in the mountain. We'll see that here in just a minute as we read along. But the first word, Genesis 25, verse 1, is Vaydaber. This is the pronoun he.
Which one?
I'm trying to get this thing to shut up and leave my text on. I don't know why it lighted up all the vowels, but anyway. This first character right here, that is the letter Yud, and it represents the pronoun he. And it also is the first letter of the sacred name. Here is Yud He Vav He, the sacred name of God. And of course it starts off with a Yud. And the rabbis teach that the Yud by itself is the letter of Yahweh, but they don't call him Yahweh. They call him Hashem. They call him various other acronyms.
Why is that? Why don't they call him Yahweh?
They don't call him Yahweh because they are afraid that someone will start using that name and then abuse his name and can get people in trouble. And so they don't teach that name. That's what they tell me. If I ask them, it's because they don't want to take a chance on someone abusing the name. I don't think God would have left it in the Bible if he didn't want us to say it. My personal opinion, and you're welcome to your opinion, you're welcome to mine too. Yud He Vav He, we pronounce it Yahweh. I'm not ashamed to say the name Yahweh. I'm careful with how I use it. There are certain places that I won't use that name because it's not a place where I feel like he would want to be honored. They wouldn't honor that name. And so if they're not going to honor the name, I don't want to use it in front of them. But when we're here as a community of faith, and we all believe in the God of the Bible, and when it's got Yud He Vav He in the text, I'm going to say Yahweh. And if somebody doesn't like it, well, I'm sorry, but, hold to your traditions as you believe them, I guess, but just make sure they're in agreement with the Torah. And there's nothing in the Torah that says you can't pronounce his name. Nowhere. And so we are not ashamed of the name Yahweh. In fact, I want everyone to know the name of the God that I worship. Because there are many gods in this world. How do you know which one you're worshiping if you don't know his name? Is that correct?
Yeah.
My dad has a name. I honor him. I honor him highly. I revere him. I would never say anything to belittle his name or to make light of it in any way. And when I introduced him to any of my friends, I would say, "This is my father, Harold Hall." Did he get mad at me for using Harold? No. It was very respectfully done. And the same thing goes with my God, Yahweh. I don't have a problem introducing him to people as Yahweh. So the first letter of his name is the Yud. And we can see the Yud right here. Bring up my Bible, please. So this is a Vav. The rabbis teach that that's a Vav reaching down to the earth line as a Yud on the top with a staff. A staff usually indicates a ruler stick. You see the Ten Commandments?
Yes.
Okay. Well, in the Ten Commandments, the emperor of Egypt had a little hooked little scepter, I guess you could say, he carried in his hand, and that was the sign of his authority to rule Egypt. And there were other things too, like he wore the crown of Egypt. The Egyptian kings had a designated crown, and he wore it because it was a badge of honor, if you will. So when the Yud is at the beginning of the word, remember that Hebrew reads right to left. When the Yud is at the beginning of the word, it indicates that it is a incompleted verb. It's something that has not been yet done. And so this is Vaydaber. And we understand that the Vav reaching down always means what? Does anybody know? Always means the same thing. It's a conjunction. It's the word and. It ties things together. And so this would literally be translated, and he spoke. See if I can get this to highlight properly. This isn't going to work with me. I will fix this, okay?
Rabbi,
Yes?
I'm at just a quick revamp on.
For all the viewers online, I apologize. There's something wrong with the video buffering. I'm going to have to reconvert the broadcast. Give me about 2 minutes, and please return to us.
Yeah, there it is. So I will. Now it disappeared on me again.
Oh, it's showing good here, but not good here.
All right, now I'm ready to go again. That's turning out to be more of a pain than I was hoping it would be. So I will use a highlighter on my thing here.
Oh, it looks like it rendered itself, so we'll continue live.
Okay. I have highlighted the word, the pronoun he at the beginning of the word davar. Daber or davar is a verb, and it means speak to somebody, but it does not mean say to somebody. It means speak to somebody. It's implied to say, but say is a way of expressing communications that's going to go out from someone. Daber means literally word or thing. So I like to call this, instead of just speak, I like to call it the word. The word of, and then the next person here, that is who's doing the speaking. So, Vaidaber Yahweh. So, and Yahweh spoke. Now, if the pronoun's at the beginning of the verb, everybody look up on the screen, follow with me here.
Okay.
You got daber. Let me go back to my thing here. There's daber, and it's literally means word. And Yahweh's word to Moses would be the literal understanding of this first part of this sentence. So normally when this yud is at the beginning of the word instead of at the end of the word, it indicates it hasn't yet been done. So if it didn't have the vav here, and that's the vav, then it would be looking at and Yahweh will speak. It's a future tense occurrence. It hadn't happened yet. But because of the vav, it reverses the tense. If it's a completed form, it becomes incompleted and vice versa. So here, Vaidaber then becomes a completed form of the word. So Yahweh worded to Moses, and he spoke, or the word of the Lord to Moses is a good way to translate that. So, okay, we're in 25:1. That's the Parsha, the beginning of the Parsha. So the word of Yahweh to Moses, Behar, that means in the mount. And the mount's name is Sinai. I looked up the word Sinai. There is no information on that word. It's just a name. Okay? So we really don't have anything to connect it with any other ancient languages or anything of that nature. We just don't know where it came from. There's no information available on the source of that name. Probably from Yahweh himself. So in Mount Sinai, and this is the word amor. Amor means to say. Amor. Lemor means to say. If it was imor, it'd be he said, or he's to say. But here it's got to say on it. So we can see then that this is something that is a completed form of the word, or the verb, imor, say. Let's go on down to verse 2. And here's the word again. Word to the sons of Israel. In other words, I want you to convey this concept to the children of Israel. And then, Marta. Now here we've added a pronoun at the end of the word, and that is the pronoun you. Does anybody know what the masculine form of the word you is in Hebrew? Anybody? It's atah. Atah. So we get the ta on the end of the word here as you. And it's understood to be the masculine form of it. Atah would be masculine, and at would be feminine. So if it was just a ta without the ah underneath it, see that little T symbol underneath the ta? Anyway, that is the masculine form because it ends with the ah sound. If it didn't have the ah sound on it, then it would be the feminine form. So now let's read it and see what it says. The word unto the children of Israel, and you say, so God is still speaking from verse 1. We see that God is communicating with Moses in Mount Sinai. And verse 2, word unto the children of Israel, and you say, Elohem, and that's the plural masculine ending on the directive of who he's going to be speaking to. and it's the first person plural masculine ending. But because it's a masculine ending, everybody thinks, well, they're all men there and there's no women. No. When you have a mixture in a crowd, it always uses the masculine form of the verb. So it's assumed that they could be women in with this mix. More than likely, there will be women in with the mix. And so aleihim means unto them. That's unto him means them. Ki tavo. This is the word you again, and it's the masculine form of the word you. And it says when, ki can be when, or it can become like, or as, or, and it says when. I think the best translation form on this is when. When tavo, when y'all come. See, Moses was a Texan. He always used the y'all forms. Ta is you, and the u on the end tells us that it's plural. Okay? So when you have a verb ending with the u sound, it's going to be plural. Now, I know I'm giving you a lot of information to start off with here, but just bear with me. There's no test at the end of the session, so don't feel any pressure. So when he said, say unto them, when you come, and then all would be implied because of the u at the end of the word, unto ha'eretz. Ha'eretz. At the beginning of a word, ha always means the. To the land. To the, not just any old land, but to the land. The land. Which, ani is the proper form of the word I, which I, notan, and that word always means give. And there are other forms of this word. The letter nun is called a soft consonant, and sometimes it gets absorbed by other letters around it. So if, for example, Vainatan, that wouldn't be a good example. But if there was another letter, maybe a tav in front saying you give. I just went past it. So you give would be more specific. And the tav in front of natan, the nun would be absorbed by the tav. And so therefore, it would become tatan. You give. Okay, so that's some of the general ideas on the way these words operate, the laws of grammar for Hebrew. So give lechem, to y'all. Here it is, the plural masculine ending again. V'shavta, and you will shav. Let me just open that one up here. Okay, so this is going to be the word Shabbat. Everybody say Shabbat.
Shabbat.
What does Shabbat mean?
It's a set part, seventh day of rest. It's a holy day.
Okay. The word Shabbat literally means rest. That's what it means. And rest.
Rich.
Rest. To lie back and relax and rest. Okay? So Shabbat literally understood to be Shabbat, means rest. But here it is, Shabbat, and it means the seventh day of the week, Sabbath. But it's the same shorish, the same root to the word. And so Shabbat then is defined in the scripture here. The Torah defines it as the seventh day of the week. It's the day of rest, day of Shabbat. And so Shiva means seven, Shiva, but Shabbat means rest. So it's always understood to be done on the seventh day. So it's a little confusing for people that haven't grown up with Hebrew to see this, because sometimes it means rest and sometimes it means Sabbath. When does it mean which? you know. So this is a Shabbat to Yahweh. Now this is very interesting concept. So God is speaking to the children of Israel by Moses, and he says, when you come into the land which I am going to give you, then Shabbata, a rest, the land. So who's going to be doing the resting? The land is going to be doing the resting. So the land, Shabbat ha'eretz Shabbat la Yahweh. So it's a repetition of the word Sabbath. Now, in just a minute, we're going to look at this same word in the next verse, I believe, and it's going to give it a more emphatic form of the word rest. And I want to tell you that our people were not the first people to be informed that God wanted the land to rest. The fact is that God gave this land originally to the, I guess you could say, the ancient inhabitants of the land, which would have been, for example, the Philistine, which really had come in and settled in the coastland area of the Mediterranean right there next to Israel. And there were others, the Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amalekites, and all the other ites. And they were given God's instructions. He wanted them to keep the land and make it rest on the seventh year. So they would work it hard and produce a lot from it in the first 6 years, but the seventh year, God wanted the land to rest. But guess what? They didn't keep the Sabbath rest for the land and didn't let the land go fallow during a whole year, and so consequently, God got angry with them. They knew what he wanted them to do. They refused to do it. And so because of that, he took the land away from those inhabitants and gave it to Abraham. So Abraham then would become the inheritor, the new inheritor of the land of Canaan. And it's because of this refusal to let the land rest that this took place. God told Abraham when he first took him to the land and let him see around this beautiful land, he said, this is going to be for you and your children, which will come after you, but the time is not yet. The land has not, the inhabitants of the land, the people who dwell here, have not reached the fullness of their sins yet. So what's the fullness of their sins? He's given them plenty of times to correct their path and their direction. So God is insisting that they give the land a rest. That was his choice. And did they do it? No. So he gave it over then to Abraham and his descendants. But it was some 450 years later before God was able to get the land actually into their hands, because they had been gone into Egypt and were slavery there to the Pharaoh and to the people of Egypt, and they were there for 450 years, and then finally God sends Moses in to rescue them out of the land and bring them into their promised land. And he's telling them here, 6 years, in verse 3. 6 years. Bring it up again. 6 years. Sheish Shanim. There it is. Sheish Shanim. 6 years. Tizra. Now this verb here literally means to sow seed. Sow seeds. And this is the pronoun you at the beginning of it. So it's not a completed item, is it? It's an incompleted item because the pronoun is at the beginning. You. So therefore, you shall sow seeds. I'm trying to get you to an understanding so you can see how these things are normally formed in the translation. And in this case, I agree with the way they translated it just fine. I don't see any problem with it at all. Tizra. Zara is the shorish or the root. It's a verb, or it can be a noun, depending on how it's used. Tizra means you shall scatter seed. And the next word here is Sadeh. Tells you where you're going to sow your seeds, and it's going to be in the field. So 6 years you shall sow your seeds in the field, and 6 years, shanim, as years, 6 years, tizmor. Tizmor means to harvest, or to prune the vines. Tizmor means you will take the grapes and prune the vines so that it will produce the maximum quality and amount of fruit. So he says, you shall prune your vineyard. Carmel. How many of you have heard of Mount Carmel in the Bible? You heard that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's because Mount Carmel was the mountain of Elijah, the prophet, and he had a vineyard up there on top of his mountain. That's where he grew his vineyard. And so that's why it became known as Carmel, because Carmel means literally a vineyard. So Tizmor Karmika, and this ka on the end is again the masculine first-person pronoun, you. So this is going to be, you shall prune your vineyard, and asafta. And asaf means to gather in a harvest, and it doesn't have to be grapes, it can be anything, whatever the product is that you're sowing. If you sow wheat, you're going to get wheat. If you sow corn, what are you going to get? Corn. So any of those things that yield its fruit is considered to be the bringing in of the produce. Now, how many of you know what the Hebrew word for fruit is? Richard, do you know that one?
Yeah. Well, in our prayer, thanking God for the fruit of the vine.
Exactly.
Beret, peri, hagafen.
Yes. So peri then is
Peri
understood to be fruit.
Is fruit.
So why is this word used here? It's not peri. Tevuata. And that literally means, instead of fruit, it means the increase of all of your crops that you are dealing with, regardless of what it is. It may not have what we perceive to be fruit in the sense of a nice apple or orange or a pomegranate or whatever it is that we may be hoping for from the produce of our field, but it certainly is the increase of our harvest. Get this thing to bring up my dictionary again. Tubua is the shorish, and it literally means the income or the produce, or figuratively the fruit. It doesn't really mean literally fruit. It means figuratively fruit. It's the harvest that has come in. So he says we're not supposed to be gathering in. Asaf means to gather. Asaf. And we're supposed to gather in tavuata, the fruit of yours. And then, or the increase of yours.
Not gathering it in, what's happening to it, Rabbi?
Well, you're going to gather it in during the 6 years.
And the seventh year, when you don't gather it in, what happens?
It's going to tell us. We have to
Fertilizer.
we have to use it for something, but we can't use it for certain things. Like, for example, we're not to gather it in and carry it down to the market and sell it. Why? Because you're causing the land to labor. Okay? And God wants it to rest. He says, and b'shana, and that means in the year, hashvi'it, the 7th year, shvi'i is 7, literally means 7th. In the 7th year is a Shabbat, Shabbaton. Now, if you'll notice, Shabbat is the root. It's the shorish. It's repeated, isn't it? Here's Shabbat right here, and here's Shabbat right here. So it's a repetition. But here on the second Shabbat, we've got something a little different. We've got a Vav and a Nun at the end of it. And according to the information I can glean from scratching around the internet and various other sources, when you end a verb with a Nun Safik at the end of it, it turns it into an imperative. It becomes an imperative. So a rest of certain rest. You don't get to choose. It's going to be happening, and you don't really have an option. It's an imperative. You follow me?
Yes.
So now, in the year 7th, a Shabbat of absolute rest, yeah, it shall be the land, for the land, Shabbat la Yahweh. It's a Sabbath rest unto Yahweh. And this is the 7th year of a cycle. So what happens is, starting from the first year we started cultivating the fields until through the rest of this cycle, we're going to count the number of years that we are planting and harvesting the fields. 6 years we plant and harvest through the entire 6 years. But on the 7th year, we don't plant and harvest. So you're not to in your field. You're not to tease raw, to sow your seeds of your vineyard, nor prune. The vineyard you shall not prune, and the field you shall not sow. And that's what this is telling you. So that's what we're supposed to do with the field in the 7th year. Now, does that mean we can't do anything with the natural self-harvest that the land goes through? I don't know if you realize it or not, but if you don't harvest your tomatoes, then those tomatoes will fall down and they'll turn rotten, and then the seed will develop. It'll go into the soil. The next year, you're going to get tomato plants there. But you're not supposed to harvest it. Lay there the whole year. Then the following year, it's going to come up again strong. Now, the 6th year, you may harvest. You're supposed to harvest the whole year. And not only that, it tells us that in the 6th year, God is going to give us enough fruit to satisfy us for 3 years. For 3 years in that 6th year. And so that will give us enough produce that if we manage it properly, we'll have food to eat all the way through the 7th year. Not only that, he tells us that these undressed vines and grapes, that you're not supposed to reap it, in other words, to cut all of the fruit off of it, but you can gather and eat what you want to eat. You can't take in more than you can eat, in other words. You're supposed to leave it lying fallow. And what happens is that the fruit and the greenery and everything goes down into the ground, and it then replenishes the earth. The earth gets to be replenished. Isn't that what happens on Shabbat when we keep it properly? We get to the end of the week. I don't know about you, but I get to the end of the week, and I come to the place that I can hardly stand another day of work. Have any of you noticed that?
Yeah.
It's like, man, I got to have my Shabbat. Where is it? I need it, right? And so finally, Friday evening comes, and I'm so excited about the Sabbath that I sometimes just go out and buy some special stuff from the market, bring it into my house so I have something really special for Shabbat, you know? And I get to forget about all my worldly pressures, all the stuff that I've been dealing with all day long, every day during the week. I'm supposed to set that aside and don't touch it, just like the 7th year of fruit. I can't touch it. I'm supposed to let it go fallow. That's what you do with all those things that are left over in your mind when you come to the end of your work week. You're supposed to let it go fallow. And it will cause you to be refreshed if you do it properly. It's really amazing. So It says, you shall not reap the grapes, the vine, leave the vine undressed, and gather a year, and do not gather. A year of rest will be the land. So the land is supposed to be resting. Now there has been some studies done on productivity in the land of Israel. And we have some of the greatest minds in the world in the colleges and things that come from Israel. And they study God's laws to see how they affect us when we obey them or when we don't obey them. And what they've discovered is that everybody that lets the land rest once every 7 years, regardless if they're doing it according to the same way the people of Israel do it or not, if they let it rest 1 year in 7, the land stays healthier. And the produce is much better. And it's much healthier to consume. So God knew what he was doing when he set this rule up. God's the master. He knows exactly what he did. He's the creator. So he says, not only that, it shall be la'achol. Achol. To akol means, it's the root for, the shorish means to eat, to consume. And it shall be for you to eat, for you, and for your servant, and all your servants and your maids, and for your hired servants, and for the stranger. I got to talk about this word stranger here because it's different. For your stranger, which is sojourning, imcha, with you. Now, what is a ger? Richard, can you answer that one?
No.
You don't know what a ger is?
Not right now.
Okay.
Remind me.
Okay, a ger literally means a nation in the most literal form of the word. And it can be Israel, it can be America, it can be Mexico, China, Russia, whatever. It's a nation. And so gerim are understood to be foreign, non-Israeli in most places. So here we see a word, ul toshavcha, and toshavcha means literally a non-resident alien, not somebody who's purchasing land and living there as your neighbor, but someone who's just passing through. They don't have any rights to any land or inheritance in the land. And so, let me just bring this up. Toshav means a dweller, but not outlandish. In other words, not from another country, and yet they're still not of the nation of Israel, especially as distinguished from a native citizen. So there are somebody who's a foreign person, but they are dwelling there amongst you, and that's what the word ger means. But it's a little bit more. They haven't really decided to sojourn with you. In other words, to obey and keep the same laws of yours, and to be worshiping your God and things of that nature. It's a mere lodger, or you could say a resident alien. So these people retain their identity as a foreign national, and yet they are in the land of Israel. And so God is telling us that we can feed these crops that are laying fallow. They can be used to feed these who are foreign nationals living on our soil, or to the widows and the orphans and those who are in the land who are hungry. It's to be food for them, but you can't take it down the market and sell it. So, go back up. So here is gerim, That's the masculine plural form of the word ger. Ger is understood to be a sojourner, but a sojourner implies someone who's living in the land as a citizen, not just as a foreign national that's just there. Ger is normally the word that's used without this toshav. Toshav would be indicating that they're not a citizen. They're not becoming a part of Israel. Next, we go to verse 7. Are you getting anything out of this? Okay. In verse 7, it says, Bahima. That's the Shoresh that I've highlighted for you. Bahimat, your cattle. It's specifically dealing with cows. Cows, oxen, larger kosher animals that you may raise or produce food for eating and things of that nature, or to use them to plow the fields with or whatever. But this is really dealing with harvesting them for food. So that in that case, these would be, I guess, what you call a bovine would be the word. Bahima, bahimtaka, your cattle. And for the various other kinds of beasts that are in the area, maybe deer would be included with that, or who knows, maybe bears or whatever coming through, they can eat that. They can harvest that stuff. You know, bears like fruit.
Yeah.
You know that? In fact, if you live up in Alaska, you better be careful where you're harvesting fruit, because the bears go out looking for it too. And I think he's a little bigger than you are, and so you might want to run when you see him coming. So anyway, it's for the feast of the beasts that are in Aritzaka, and that means literally your land, your country, if you will. Tiyeh, and shall be every or all of your tabuatah, the increase, the harvest, the ingathering of the harvest, all of it shall be under these same rules, and will be for eating. Then in verse 5, so now we know what to do with this produce that grows of its own, right? In fact, it's going to tell us here in just a few minutes that there's a special word that's used for the self-planting, self-harvesting. And that's a different word. I enjoy looking these words up. In verse, let me see if it's in the previous verse, because I think I've already passed it. No, I don't guess I have yet, so I'll probably come to it as we go. It's not that one. Well, let's just go on with verse 8, and we'll come to it eventually. V'safarta, and you, this is the pronoun you. Is it at the beginning or end of the word? This is a verb. Is the ta at the beginning or the end?
The end.
It's at the end. If it's on the left, it's at the end. If it's on the right, it's at the beginning. Now, we have a vav in front of this verb. Now, that turns this into a vav conversive, meaning that it switches the completed or incompleted state of the verb. So, normally you would say safarta would be, and you gathered, or you counted in this case. You counted. But because of the vav, it reverses the tense of it, so it becomes, and you shall count. So it's a future occurrence that it's speaking of. And he says, you shall count unto you Shiva, which means 7 Shabbatot, Sabbaths of Shanim, years. 7 Sabbaths of years. 7 Shanim. 7 times, pa'amim means literally repetitions of these Sabbaths. And they shall be unto you a space of 7 Sabbaths, Shabbatot, of Hashanim, of years. Tesha ve'arba'im. Tesha means 9, and arba'im is 40. 49 years. So we're going to count 7 Sabbaths of years, which totals what? 7 times 7? 49. So we come to the verse 9 here. And you shall cause ha'avarta. Let me just look that word up and make sure I'm telling you correctly. Okay, avar, I remember the word avar now. My brain was skipping over a word I had already known. And avar means literally to cross over. When the people of Israel came into the promised land, they crossed over a river. Do you remember the name of it? Jordan. The Jordan River. And so when they crossed over, it uses the word avar, avar hajardan. So they crossed avar, over, and that's where we get our word over the Jordan. Now here, they're going to cross over something. Shofar. What's a shofar?
Trumpet.
That's the original horn, right? Given by one of those sacrificial lambs, those rams that they cut the horns off of and carve them out, make them into a shofar. So the shofar is a ram's horn. And it's teruah. Teruah means literally a joyful noise, a long blast on the shofar.
What verse are you?
We're in verse 9. It says, clamor, acclamation of joy, or a battle cry, especially clangor of trumpets as an alarm. So you're going to be making a big noise throughout the land with the shofars. And it is called, this is not the Hebrew word for jubilee, but it is a yovel, which is understood to be jubilee. And I don't see yovel in this section here. So I would say this is probably a bad place for them to translate the word jubilee and put it in here, because it doesn't have anything to do with teruah, except that teruah is sounded on jubilee. So this is Bachodesh, means a month. Hashvi'i, the 7th month. But Asor means the 10th. So it's the 7th on the 10th month, the 7th day of the 10th month, on the Day of Atonement, HaKippurim, the day of...
That's not July. What is it?
That's going to be September or October, somewhere right in that time frame. Very early October or middle to late September. And they shall ta'avir, make a sound. That's why they translated it here. Let's just take a quick look. That's still the word over. So they are going to They're going to cross over. It doesn't have anything to do with making a sound, but it might. When you cross over the Jordan into the land of Israel, I bet they were sounding trumpets all over the place. If I was there, I would want to, wouldn't you? We're coming to the homeland. And the shofar is the trumpet in all or throughout all of y'all's land. So you're going to be sounding these sounds. This thing wouldn't do that. Throughout your land. Verse 10, Vakish Kadashtem. This is the root for Kodesh, meaning separated, special, sanctified, set apart. So, and y'all shall sanctify or set apart. This is the sign of the direct object telling you that the next word is what you're going to be setting apart, which is the year. And what year is it? Hashamashim. Hamashim. Hamash means 5. Hamashim means 50. So the 50th year is to be set aside as special or holy, a year to be revered and sanctified. And it is a Shana, a year, and a proclamation. A Kara, you will call out. Y'all will call out. Tem on the end is y'all. The roar means literally victory or liberty for everybody in the land. You'll proclaim it. Victory or liberty. In this case, really reflects more on liberty than victory. And how so? Because all land that has been sold is going to revert to its original owner. And that's the instructions in the year of Jubilee. And it's throughout all the land unto every one of its inhabitants. Yobel. Now there's Jubilee spelled out in Hebrew. Yobel. He means he is a Jubilee. Jubilee is a seriously joyful noise-making, okay? And it shall be unto you v'shavtem, and y'all shall return every man unto his possession. See, when God gave the land of Israel to us, he instructed Moses to divide the land up by tribe by the casting of lots. And so as the people came into the land, he would select a lot and give it to the first tribe, and another lot and give it to the next tribe, and throughout until all the land had been apportioned out to the people of Israel. There were 2 tribes that did not get land. Actually, there's 1 tribe that did not get land. What tribe would that be? Levi, that's correct. And why is that?
Temple.
There's a very interesting story behind it. Abraham got really angry with Levi and Benjamin. You remember why?
Disobedience.
No. A Moabite, I believe, yeah, it was a Moabite, had raped their sister. And she got pregnant. And Levi and Benjamin got so upset that they decided that they were not going to let these people of this land who defiled their sister become a part of their family. That they're simply not going to let them marry their sister. And so they plotted and schemed and told them they wanted to come and marry the sisters, and so they said, only if you circumcise yourselves. Cut off the foreskin. And so they agreed to do it. And so they let them circumcise themselves, and then on the 3rd day after they circumcised themselves, where they are most sensitive, their wound left over from the circumcision is ultra painful at that point. That's when they chose to go in and start slaying them, and they killed them all. Went through the whole place and killed them all.
I'm sorry, who did the slaying?
Levi and Benjamin,
Killed who?
the Moabites that were wanting to marry their sister. It wasn't Tamar. Who was it? I can't remember now. But anyway, so these guys, Jacob didn't want them to do that. He was having his family be expanded here with all these nations that are going to be circumcised and become a part of Israel. And he got upset with Levi and Benjamin, and because of it, he cursed them and he said, "You will not inherit land with your brothers." Specifically dealing with Levi. Benjamin, he didn't really so much curse, but Levi, he cursed him because of that action. He should have known better, and he wasn't taking care of Jacob's best interest. And Jacob just knew that now these people are going to rise up and try to kill them. Well, God had other plans. God was choosing Levi. He says, "I will be Levi's inheritance." And that's what God told the people of the tribe of Levi. And that they would have no land. They would not get farmland, in other words, big blocks of land given to them in the land of Israel. But God did permit them to buy places inside the cities of the land. So Levites could buy nice houses and things like that to live in, but they would not have land that would become productive for growing crops and supporting herds and things of that nature. So when it says here that he would restore every man into his possession, this is not talking about Levi. Levi does not get possessions in the land. But they get whatever they can purchase for themselves will be okay, but they can't have the family allotment. So it will be restored, and every man unto his family. Mishpokah. Mishpokah means family. And this would be the short. Right there. Mishpokah. His family. He shall return. So the land will come back to whoever originally owned the land, because that's family inheritance. And God wanted the families to maintain their inheritance. But he told Levi, I'm your inheritance. I want to go back to chapter 25, verse 11. It says, Yovel, and that's Jubilee, that year, Shana, the 50th year, shall be unto you. You shall not sow. Well, that's the same thing they did on the 49th year. They couldn't sow. Right?
2 years in a row.
So the 7th Sabbath of years was the 49th year, and you're not allowed to sow. And then the 50th year comes around, and you don't get to sow, a plant, or harvest in that year either.
2
Which
years
is why
in
he
a
gave
row.
us 3 years in advance on the 48th year in this example.
Exactly. So you shall not sow or reap it in, but except that which grows of itself. Here's the word I was looking for. Safichiyah. And it means something spontaneous, something that it just grows up itself. Okay? It means a self-sown crop. You don't have to go out and plant it because it does it by itself. Figuratively, a freshet. And I don't know what that word means. That's an earlier, I'm just not familiar with that word. But anyway, it is a self-sown crop. So there will be a self-sown crop that year that you can eat on during the year, but you are not to plant or harvest. You find that interesting?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So this Safichiyah, literally Hiyah, Tafishia. Literally means something that is developed on its own, without any grooming, plowing, planting, anything. It just grows up. And he says you should not gather it all in as you would your harvest, and you're supposed to leave your grapevines undressed. All right. I feel like we've probably done enough in the Hebrew for now, so let's go take a look then at the English. We'll use the Complete Jewish Bible. Verse 12 says, because it is a Yovel, it will be holy for you. Whatever the fields produce will be food for all of you. In this year of Yovel, or Jubilee, every one of you is to return to the land that he originally owned, would be the implication here. So if you sold your land to somebody because you became impoverished and couldn't pay your bills and you had to have relief, you could sell your land to somebody, but then on the year of Jubilee, they have to return the land to you. Okay?
Now, here is a question I had, because it doesn't say this in the context, but you would need to make that explicitly known to them, wouldn't you?
He does in the Torah.
But if this is a person that hasn't read the Torah and isn't paying attention and you're selling it to,
Then he could end up getting messed up.
that's
So it's better to read the Torah, isn't it?
well what I'm trying to say in context. Yeah, that's all great, well and good until they're like, no. Person you sell the land to is like, I gave it.
God gives-
You didn't tell me this.
God gives instructions. Bring this up a little. God gives instructions on how these Sabbath of years and the Jubilee year are supposed to go.
Yep.
And he says that if you buy somebody's field, for example, someone's coming to you for to lend you money so that you can get out of trouble with other creditors or whatever,
Yep.
you have to take into account how long you're going to get the land in the price of the land. So that if you're going to only have it a short time, then you're not going to pay as much for the land. So that consideration for the year of Jubilee has to be a factor in all land dealings. Okay? So that would answer your question.
Gotcha.
And at the end of the 50th year, then all that during the 50th year, all the land reverts. There's a frog in here. I feel like I'm back at Pesach again.
So what?
I'll leave him alone till after the teaching. He's not going to interrupt him.
So what year then are we in this context?
Well, it's hard to say. We have to go by Israel's reckoning.
Right.
We can't just come in as foreigners and never having experienced these things or done these things before and make up a bunch of rules and say, okay, this is going to be the 50th year. They're not going to listen to you. They're going to listen to their own teachers and authorities on this matter. And so I can't recall. It seemed like they just had a Jubilee. I can't remember. But there is a 50-year cycle. Okay, I guess they're shifting their crews around.
I'm paying attention. I'm listening.
Okay.
I'm listening.
So did that answer your question?
So last year,
I'm not sure. I think it may have been last year, but it was pretty recent. They had a Jubilee.
I think they said it was last year.
Yeah,
Pope
probably.
said it was like year before.
The Pope did?
Yeah,
No, he's not
the year
Jewish.
Jubilee.
He's not Jewish.
Where did the Pope get that from?
Yeah, exactly.
If he got it from Israel,
Maybe if the Israelites did it, but we have to turn to the source. You don't go to the Baptist church to find out about Catholicism.
well, you could try, but you might be
If you
disappointed.
did, would you come back knowledgeable of truth? Probably not.
You didn't know they were
And likewise, you don't go to the Catholic Church to learn about Baptistism.
Right.
So if you're going to learn about Judaism, where are you going to go? to Judaism. And so that's the only way you can really answer these questions. So anyway, reading on in verse 12, it says, because it is a Yovel, it will be holy for you. Whatever the fields produce will be food for all of you. In this year of Yovel, every one of you is to return to the land that he owns as an inheritance that was given to him by God and Moses. If you sell anything to your neighbor or buy anything from him, neither of you is to exploit the other. So in other words, the one that's selling the land needs to be aware of the year of Jubilee and how far off it is, and give a price that's fair according to the number of years that he's going to own the land. And vice versa, both the buyer and the seller need to be aware. Don't exploit one another, in other words. Rather, you are to take into account the number of years after the Yovel, whether you buy land from your neighbor, and he is to sell it to you according to the number of years of crops that will be raised under his care. If the number of years remaining is large, you will raise the price. So in other words, if this is sold to purchased by someone right at the end of the year of Jubilee, it's going to be 50 years before he's going to have to return the land. And therefore, he should be expected to pay a bigger price for the land. Go down a little more here. You're not to take advantage, rather you to keep my regulations and rulings and act accordingly. If you do, you will live securely in the land. The land will yield its produce. You will eat until you have enough, and you will live there securely. So God makes a lot of promises for keeping these rules. Verse 20, if you ask, aren't we allowed to sow seed or harvest what our land produces? What are we going to eat in the 7th year? Then I will order my blessings on you during the 6th year, so that the land brings forth enough produce for all 3 years. And that will even cover for you in the year of Jubilee, like Shane pointed out. Right. In the 8th year, you will sow seed but eat the old, the stored produce, until the 9th year. That is, until the produce of the 8th year comes in. And you will eat the old stored food. The land is not to be sold in perpetuity, in other words, permanently, because the land belongs to me. You're only foreigners and temporary residents with me. Therefore, when you sell your property, you must include the right of redemption. That is, if one of you becomes poor and sells some of his property, his next of kin can come and buy back what his relative has sown. If the seller has no one to redeem it, but becomes rich enough to redeem it himself, he will calculate the number of years the land was sold for and refund the excess to its buyer. So there's got to be fairness in all these dealings. And it return to his property. If he hasn't sufficient means to get it back himself, then what he sold will remain in the hands of the buyer until the year of Yovel. In the Yovel, the buyer will vacate it and the seller return to his property. So it's a very fair thing. If someone dwells in a dwelling in a walled city, and he has 1 year after the date of the sale in which to redeem it, he has 1 year to redeem it. In other words, if somebody buys the property and then the guy that sold the property has a change of heart, he has a whole year to change his mind and decide not to go through with the deal.
Seller's remorse.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you, I've seen people sell property and then just cry when they realize the mistake they made. And if they were living under the biblical law, they would have had a year to make that decision permanent. For a full year, he will have the right of redemption. But if he has not redeemed the dwelling in the walled city, what kind of a city?
Wall.
Walled city. If the city is big enough that it has a wall protecting it, within the year, then the title in perpetuity passes to the buyer. In other words, the guy doesn't get the year to think on it and then retract his deal. So he's going to have to make his decision, and once he makes the contract with the buyer and the money is exchanged, it's a done deal. He doesn't have any options to go back and renege on his decisions to sell. So in a walled city, he doesn't get the right of redemption. In a non-walled city, it has the same rules applying to it as it applies to the fields and things. So there will be a year or two for him to decide to redeem it back or not to. In verse it says it will not revert in the Yovel. In verse 31, however, houses in villages not surrounded by walls are to be dealt with like the fields in the countryside. They may be redeemed before Yovel, and they revert in the Yovel. Concerning the cities of the Leviim, the Leviim don't have land, do they? So concerning the cities of the Leviim, the houses in the cities they possess, the Leviim are to have a permanent right of redemption. If someone purchases a house from one of the Leviim, then the house he sold to the city, in the city where he owns property, still will revert to him in the Yovel, because the houses in the cities of the Leviim are their tribe's possession among the people of Israel. The fields in the open land around their cities may not be sold, because that is their permanent possession. The Levites and the Kohanim were allowed to have land for raising the sacrificial lambs and goats and cattle. Okay? And that's a part of how they were able to survive as a people, was by the selling of these sacrifices to people that were going into the temple. Let's say someone has a nice little sheep, and they wanted to use it for a sacrifice, and they get to the temple, and all of a sudden its nose is running. It becomes unfit for the sacrifice. So what are they going to do? Well, they have to buy another one. Where are they going to get it? Right there at the temple from the Leviim. They raised these flocks for that purpose, and they would find them a specimen that was acceptable for sacrifice, and then they would still be able to make a deal for the lamb that they wanted. Usually there was a little bit of a markup on these lambs to help benefit the Levites, whose only job was to serve the Lord there at the temple. Now, what does it say of the scripture where Yeshua came in and started overturning the money changers' tables? Now, why were there money changers there? What were they doing? Why were they changing money? Does anybody know?
Because they were buying and selling there.
That
It
was
has
their
to do
purpose.
with-
That's the town square. That's where people go to
For sacrifice.
to obtain the money and
Mhm.
change in their money.
Right?
That's their
So
purpose.
why wouldn't they be able to use regular money at the temple?
That's not what the temple was made for.
What's wrong with the money that they can't use it in their temple worship?
Well, like any country, when you go into a country, it has its own form of
Yes.
trade. So they, by being money changers alone, they were not breaking the laws of God. It's only if you were shortchanging people
Right?
that you are breaking the laws of God, and that's why he was angry.
That's correct. He called them thieves instead of righteous.
Mhm.
But thinking about the money itself now, there's a problem with the money itself. Whose face,
Caesar.
according to Yeshua's words,
yeah.
was embossed on that coin?
Caesar.
Is it proper for a Jewish community to have a face of a man embossed on their coins,
No.
according to the Torah?
No
No.
face of any man or any animal.
Right.
Well, there goes U.S. currency.
Yeah. Okay, so they would have to take that. Well, not exactly, Shane, and I'll tell you why.
Huh.
That's why they have the money changers there at the temple. so that people who did not get a chance to exchange their money for kosher money to go into the temple and worship God with would have an opportunity to buy temple shekels in order to transact their godly business at the temple. Okay? And since the Levim are supposed to be able to sell lambs and goats and things at the temple, because that's why they have the land, that's why they raise the goats, so that they can give a kosher animal in exchange for the one that may not be kosher. Yes, sir?
Does the Israelite money of today in Israel, does it have pictures on it?
Yeah.
And is that wrong?
But there's no temple.
But it's not used for the temple worship.
Even though the scripture says,
Okay.
don't make images.
The Temple Mount Faithful Institute, of which I know you're aware of, are developing coins for temple worship. And there's a guy named Prager, who is the artist that they've consulted with, and he has designed the coins for temple servants. And I've got a few of his shekels, and just for keepsakes, that he has designed for use when the temple gets built. And they're really fully expecting to build that temple. They're expecting it not to be too far away. And when they do, they're going to have coins that meet the biblical mandates for kosher temple shekels. And so he's designed coins that are designed around God's laws for the purpose of worshiping Yahweh.
Who has?
Prager, I think is his name. But he has a place called Beged Ivri. The Hebrew garments, in other words. Beged means garments, and Ivri means Hebrew garments. And so he designed these garments. He's designed the temple shekels. He's designed a box for placing the temple shekels and the various other things for collections, and designed them according to the biblical instructions. So they're ready to go, and they can put these at the temple the minute it pops up. They're going to have these things ready to do. So anyway, the Levites then were using this opportunity. It was in order to help them out in their lack of having land to make profits off of. So they used the temple sacrifices and the exchange of money in order to be able to produce income for their needs. What do you do when Johnny needs a new pair of shoes or a new suit or whatever? Well, Mama's either going to have to make it or they're going to have to go to the market and buy something for it. How they do that? Well, that would be with the income they produce from the exchange of money and or selling of livestock for the sacrifice at the temple. So that's why Yeshua was angry with them, but not because they were exchanging shekels for pagan currency money. Romans were putting the faces of pagan deities on their coins. How can they use that to honor God with? They can't. And so these exchange shekels were important for being able to worship God with. The Romans were making it hard enough for them as it was, but the Levites would exchange their pagan monies for monies that were not pagan so that they could use it to honor God. So I can understand why Yeshua would overthrow those money changers' tables if they were charging exorbitant exchange rates and or exorbitant prices for the sacrifices that they were exchanging out for people. So those are issues that are problematic that Yeshua was upset about because they were stealing the regardless of the people. If a widow came up and she wanted to buy a couple of turtle doves for an offering, well, they're going to charge her maybe twice what the thing's worth, you know. And so he didn't like it when they were using religiosity and religion to make big gains on the people.
Gouging the market.
Yeah.
Mhm. Now, in the land of Israel, just south of Jerusalem, I went on tour there, and we went into the Bell Caves. Bell Caves. Their limestone is very soft, and they mined it out underneath the hills and the mountains, and as they mine it out, it turns into a bell-shaped interior. And that's why they call them the Bell Caves. And in the Bell Caves, they had carved out niches with resting and nesting places for the doves and other birds that were kosher for sacrifices. And literally, in one cave I went into, there were just literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these nesting places for the doves. And doves were still in there nesting in the day that we went through there. It was really amazing to see. And that was close enough that they could raise the doves there in that bell cave and carry them up in cages up to the market and then sell them to the people as part of their sacrifices. So the scriptures come to life when you get to go and see those things firsthand, And that's why I want to make another tour to Israel and set up our own tour guides so we can see some special things that you might not see otherwise. And one of my friends in Israel is one of the top tour guides in the land.
This year or next?
Well, I doubt I'll be able to do it this year, but it might. We could do it this year. We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll just see how it falls. And I'm planning, if things permit, I'm planning to try to help people that otherwise wouldn't be able to go and see those things by helping to clear the way for them by, maybe you can't afford the ticket to go or the price of some of the tours that we want to go on to see. And so we'll be able to maybe help out some of those things. Just pray for us that these business deals that we've got going will come through so we can do that. So that's really in my heart to do. Verse 35, if a member of your community becomes poor so that he can't support himself among you, you are to assist him as you would a foreigner or a temporary resident so that he can continue living with you. Do not charge him interest.
Usurious.
Usury in the King James Bible. Usury. But it's interest. It's the same thing as just charging interest. Do not charge him interest or otherwise profit from him, but fear your God so that your brother can continue living with you. Do not take interest when you loan him money or take a profit when you sell him food.
Rabbi, there's a question in this direction.
Yes.
Does this also apply to like a rich man that comes in and or somebody who's well-to-do just wants to borrow some money temporarily?
No.
Does this also apply to them?
That depends. If they are a poor person in Israel, he is not allowed to profiteer off of them. But he may profiteer off of the strangers, the ones who are not citizens of the land.
What if it's a rich person that's a Hebrew descent?
What about it?
What
And
it's
he's
all
rich,
about-
but he just doesn't have the money with him, so he borrows some money. Does that change the fact, because this is talking about the poor, does this change the fact because he's not
The
poor?
scripture clearly says that we are not to profit with excessive usury over a brother. It's clear. Any brother. Just because he's rich, you don't go up there and charge him 100% interest. Okay? So you can't, just based upon the fact he's wealthy, you don't just go and take advantage of your brother. And so God is not against wealth. He is against abusing each other in business.
Or how you gain it.
Right.
And that's
or
why,
abusing the poor because they are poor and
Yeah.
are needy.
right. But that's one of the reasons why God didn't want us to mix linen and wool together. Because, first of all, it's very difficult to tell if wool has linen mixed in with it. Linen is a much inferior cloth. Okay? And so if you've mixed the linen with the wool, what are you doing? You're cheapening the garment. And then you can easily tell them, well, it's wool. Well, no, it's a mixture of wool. And God hates that because it's, even for buying a garment that you know is linen and wool, you're putting out a false message. You're not being true and sincere with your community. You'll be wearing that suit that looks like a brand new wool suit, and it's actually half linen, you know? So that wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be right for anybody in the community, because you can give a false representation that you are wealthy when you're really not. So God says don't mix the linen with the wool, okay? And I believe it's for the purpose, same purpose that he said don't be defrauding each other and charging excessive interest to the brothers in the land, okay? Why did God command the people of Israel to wear payas? You know, anybody not know what payas is? Payas is where you give me money. No, I'm joking. Payas is the side locks that are grown out longer on the hairdos so that it comes down.
Side locks, curls.
Yeah, the locks that they put on their heads. And also, the payas is the seat on the corners of our garments. Okay? And they're all for the same thing. They are to remind us that we are supposed to be generous with the poor. That's what it is. It's a reminder.
Rabbi.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, on the linen and wool thing, I did some research and I found it fascinating that linen has healing properties. It gives off a certain frequency that's healing, and wool does the same thing. But if you mix the two together, it negates those healing properties and actually drains the body.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah.
What's that?
So when you mix the two, it drains the body. When you
It
don't
changes the
mix the two,
frequency
they
of the
have
natural
healing
frequency
properties.
that occurs in the
Yes.
flax or in the wool, and it causes it to become unhealthy if you mix them together. So anyway, he says, I am Adonai your God. I'm Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt in order to give you the land of Canaan and be your God. And he goes on and he gives us some other instructions. If a member of your people has become poor and sells himself to you as a slave. And, you know, we have this really bad attitude towards slavery in this country. How many of you have ever heard of the poor farms? Anybody?
Poor farms, I have not.
Poor farms. Well, back in the 40s, they had special farms where a person who came upon hard times could go and work and labor, and the company that ran the farm would profit by your labors. And then they would give you a certain fixed figure for coming there to work. And that's very close to what the Bible calls slavery. Okay? But slavery, quote, slavery, end quote, has become outlawed in this country, especially since the days of Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War and all that stuff. So now we don't have what's called slavery in this country any longer because there's a stigmatism developed about it that's not always very accurate. Someone could go to one of these farms and essentially sell themselves to the owners of this farm, and it's called a poor farm, and they could work there and make increase for the owners, and eventually they could even earn enough to be able to purchase their own freedom and then be able to go out from there.
Is that indentured servitude?
Yes.
Indentured servitude?
But see, a lot of you are doing that today to employers anyway, even though we don't have slavery here. Same thing.
Which is why we no longer have Pullman towns.
Explain, Pullman.
Pullman was the man who used to make Pullman cars.
Right, I'm familiar
And
with that.
then he took that money and he built his own towns, and he moved all of his people that worked for him into these towns, and he paid them with Pullman money.
Uh-huh.
And he would allow them to borrow from the Pullman estate and pay it off as they worked,
Right,
which became illegal.
right. That's a part of it. That was part of the system of people who became destitute being able to have a way to survive and to be able to make somewhat of a living. But I think that what Rick is referring to is that Pullman wasn't necessarily always so generous or courteous with the people that he brought into the church.
He would charge them interest rates that exceeded their
Right.
income.
Exactly. And there's a song that was written back in the 40s. It says, I was born one morning and the sun didn't shine. I picked up my shovel and I walked to the mine. I loaded 16 tons of number 9 ore. And the straw boss said, well, bless my soul. But anyway, and another one that says, another day, oh no, it's the same song. Another day older and deeper in debt. St. Peter, don't you call me because I can't go. I owe my soul to the company. So anyway, that goes from that era, you know, where people who came on hard times, they would really abuse them and not treat them fairly. But the Torah tells us that our brothers in the land are supposed to be treated uprightly and fairly, and we're not supposed to be charging excessive interest, and that we're supposed to give them an opportunity to earn enough that they could eventually even maybe purchase their own freedom. Well, we're out of time, actually. Did anybody have any comments on the class today?
Oh dear.
Okie dokie.
Sorry.
Well, did any of you have any other comments or questions that you'd like to bring up before we close out the class?
Well, next class goes to chapter 26.
Yeah. I think it starts in 26. Let me look.
Yeah, it starts from 26 through to
26.
Yeah, 26:3 through
27.
27:34. And that'll be the final reading in the book of Leviticus.
So we'll be finishing it right at the end of the month.
Right. Federico, if you go to the entrance, the lobby in the front, there are some handouts that have the readings for the rest of the month in there. They'll help you to be able to, so you can keep track of all that. Also have it on our website under the
And it's also on the calendar.
Torah reading schedule. I'm sorry?
It's also on the calendar.
Yeah. If you get one of these calendars, it'll be on there too.
Mhm.
Okay. On my website, though, I include the Bria Hadashah readings, the New Covenant readings. Well, that's all we have time for today. I would like to thank all of you who showed up watching us online, and all those who are unaware. We have a live streaming of our entire service every Sabbath on Saturday morning. At 10 a.m. I have a Bible issues class that I teach. 11 o'clock, our morning service. About 11:30, 11:45, we go into our Hebrew prayers and do some Hebrew liturgy, and then a sermon in English, which you teach a lot more of this kind of thing that you got tonight. And we'd like to encourage you to come and visit us on Shabbat. You can go to our website, tzzion.org, and in the blue navigation area in the upper right corner, you'll see the link to go to the Sabbath service streaming, which is on easystream.com. And then the one below it is for this class tonight, and it'll link you directly into our YouTube account where you can watch the live streaming like you did tonight. So I hope that all of you will join us again next Sabbath, and come and see and taste and see that God's Word is really good. I enjoy it so much that frequently I can't even lay the book down. I'll just be reading, and then all of a sudden I realize, I'm reading in Hebrew, right? All of a sudden I realize I've gone 2 parsons past where I was supposed to.
Right. I've done that.
So anyway, learn that God's Word is so good, and I hope to see you guys again next week. And may God bless you and look upon you with favor and shine His countenance upon you and give you shalom. Amen.
Amen.
Baruch Hashem.